Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Line Between Furries and Therians. So, just right out of the gate, what is this panel about? As with many panels, it seems this one is heavily about my personal story between, well, being a furry and a Therian together. The whole idea behind this panel is to kind of balance what identity and community mean. One can be a Therian and a furry. One of the many misconceptions out there in the furry fandom is just how similar these two communities are, or that like one is the other. Way back in the day, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, the media had a lot of like misinformed press around the furry fandom, and that kind of led to a lot of the misconceptions that exist today, as well as the fandom's overall reputation. And so when you kind of start out in the fandom as a furry, and then you end up becoming a Therian later on, it feels weird at first. I really didn't know how to process it, and that's kind of something that actually the last Othercon, which was the first time I ever engaged with community, kind of taught me. It was just kind of finding that balance and what each actually means to me, which is what, and all of that. So, kind of opening this up, who am I? My name is Scar in the furry fandom. More specifically, I go by Scar the Fur. I go by Scar the Fur as my username pretty much everywhere. Although, as a Therian, I go by Cyrus, which is what I named my Theriotype, just to kind of help with distinction between my other online aliases and, my real life name, just kind of as like a conversation tool. It kind of helps, balance things out. Plus, Cyrus was kind of a name that just came to me, and it's kind of has, I don't know, I have this weird connection with it I don't entirely get. But, so that's kind of how that kind of came to be. My Theriotype, though, is actually a cat. Don't get confused. This character you're seeing on screen right now, this is actually my persona, which is a little bit different. I'll be talking about the differences between them later on. But my Theriotype is a Russian blue. A Russian blue feline, domestic feline. So what exactly is my place in the alter-human, otherkin Therian community? I really don't have one, and that's kind of the weird thing. I'm like I don't want to say I'm brand new to this because I was at Othercon last year, but I never had big plans in the community. In fact, it took me so long to just even get into the community. I think I'm gonna probably I think I'm probably going to be doing panels in the future at this convention, but Therian for me was just a very personal thing, and I didn't see the need to engage with the community. I didn't have anything against it. It was just kind of something I didn't feel like I needed to do, especially when I'm involved in so many other communities already. Um, Speaking of which, furry historian, I have spent well over the last year studying almost every corner of furry history, and I have a running series on YouTube where I talk about them, where I make videos talking about different periods and events and people, the whole enchilada. And that's kind of been my claim to fame lately, with actually building up a reasonable subscriber count and kind of still growing ever so slightly to those higher numbers. And I'm excited to know that there are people that are as interested in history as I am. That's kind of a unique thing that I'm really happy. The whole idea was this is kind of a niche topic that nobody else was really doing a thorough job or a job at all of talking about. And so I thought, you know what, how about I can do that, because I'm really into furry history and it's something I really want to talk about. Nobody else is doing it. Hey, bam, I can fill a needed market. So a line between furries and Therians are not the same thing, despite what some outside the communities might think. And for me, it's not really a big problem like being in both communities, but I know there is kind of like that line where, like, just kind of for myself, I want to know which is what. It was one of the big things when kind of figuring out if I was a Therian or not. Is it just, do I just like these animals, or do I actually consider myself as one? Because I had been in the furry fandom for 2 years prior, and it was kind of just like this weird awakening. As welcoming as this community is, I didn't want to, get involved if I didn't belong here. That was just kind of like this personal question I had to figure out, and I think that's really what awakening is about. Is just, are you really are you really part of this, like, this weird subset of people? And that's really was for me. It was figuring out, do I really think I am a Therian? Do I not identify as human? Which, yeah, but also then the second half of it was, well, then what am I? I'm not going to go, this isn't a whole idea, this isn't a whole story about my awakening, but I've heard a lot of different people's stories, and I always think they're really interesting to listen to because everybody's experience is a little bit different, and they can change dramatically depending on who you're talking to and just kind of what the circumstances were that led to the start of their awakening. So moving onward, my history as a furry. I kind of had an interest in anthropomorphic animals dating back to, I think, when I was 14 or 15, and I started creating my own characters. However, I never actually found the fandom until 2016, which this is a classic story right here. Saw Zootopia, was looking up reviews of it, found some cute fan art, and that ended up leading me to the furry fandom, and I instantly fell in love for a number of reasons. Mostly it was the community, but also just this kind of unique connection I had with, well, specifically cats. And I'm like, you know what? This isn't like, I don't know if this is exactly what the community I'm looking for, but it provided an outlet for me to kind of express myself as an animal or through the lens of an animal. And that was something really unique and I really grew accustomed to. Even in the first five, which the first five is a group the first five is what I refer to as the first like really tight friend group I had in the fandom that lasted for a couple different months. And a few of these people I still have contact with today. One of them is still a very good friend of mine, Nitrogen. But a lot of them have gone their separate ways. But when I was first into the fandom on like the Fur Affinity forums, this was kind of where a lot of my time was spent was just with these fellas right here. They were some of the best friends I ever had. So later on, our community did kind of move towards Furry and when that was first starting out. If anybody's ever heard of it, it's not the best platform in the fandom. It's got a lot of problems, and it's slowly fizzling out and dying these days. But when it first started, it was actually a pretty good platform for you to go and meet furries and make friends, like join casual roleplay chats, and it was kind of like a defining period in my history with the fandom. It was everything for a very long time, even after a lot of my friends had left because of the aforementioned problems that kind of sprouted up later than its lifespan. And what kind of happened beyond that? Well, beyond Amino, I eventually kind of just migrated over to Discord, joined a few small communities, ended up kind of getting sucked into a proper furry family, and I eventually kind of got started where I am now after a period of lull. So now I'm kind of, doing history in the fandom, and I'm kind of at that high point again. In fact, I was actually just at Megaplex last weekend. That was the first FurCon I've been to in 5 years, believe it or not, and my second one ever. It's been a long time, and I had a lot of fun. But why? Why did I initially join the furry fandom, and why am I still a part of it? Well, a lot of it has to do with the community. A lot of it is because of the animals and the art, but I really think that speaks to a different thing rather than like my Therian animal, because when it comes to the fandom, it's a lot about like animals and fantasy, like the story me and my friend are writing, like the unique character designs. Like my guy doesn't look anything like a real cat would because of his markings and his outfit, and that's kind of what makes him stand out for me. Scar has always been kind of my animal interpretation of myself. I've defined him as the extension of myself. Not me, but an extension of me. A character that is heavily influenced, but it's kind of like an alternate version of me without deviating too far away from the source material, if that makes any sense. And the other big part of why is just the community. I mean, that's almost as cliche to say about any community nowadays that seems to have changed your life, but I truly think the furry community is like one of the most unique ones and kind of stands above the pack because its whole foundation was, we're going to move away, we're going to be our own thing, and we're not going to judge anybody for being a part of us, although that is not entirely true. Way back in the day, there's always been arguments about what furry fandom is, what it isn't. Even nowadays, where do we draw the line? But that's its own whole topic. Overall, as long as you're not like some like really weird extreme group, you're really allowed in the community, and most people will accept you or tolerate you or however you want to look at it, and you can make a lot of different unique friends. So what about my like early spirituality? Like I mentioned that like my like unique connection to animals, specifically felines, was something that kind of drew me into the community originally because it was, all about animals. So for a long time, cats have just been like something special to me. Even when I was really young, my mother related me to like my behavior to something she might see a cat do. Like sometimes it was more like direct things, like clawing here and there, like maybe the walls if I was frustrated. Sometimes it was just like I'm like a cat. I Sometimes it was more broad stuff like I I don't I like being alone, but when I want attention, I'll come get it. Which that's more broad. There's a whole like laundry list of like connections I have, but again, that's kind of its own topic. So these connection to felines, I've grown up around cats all my life, and they actually did have a good influence on my character design, specifically the species. I just a blue cat. That's kind of what came to me. And even before Scar, had his more distinguishing features such as his stitch marks, his stitch birthmarks, and his scar like in his hair. All that. He had a very basic blue cat design way back in the day. If you look at some of his really old art, you can kind of see what I mean. He wasn't as detailed or defined as he is now, but ever since I kind of nailed that first major design down, he really hasn't changed like at all, except for maybe some few outfit things and some other really subtle bits. But where did that cat thing come from? I honestly don't know. I've always considered myself like almost partial to cats in a way. I've grown up around cats all my life. I never really um, I mean this in the nicest way. I never really liked dogs a whole lot. I didn't hate them per se, but I wasn't. I looked at them and I kind of had like this like almost like this uneasy feeling. So it's something that's not really present with like like a lot today. In fact, a lot of dogs I've seen, I do actually don't mind. Like I used to live with a husky for a very long time. In fact, believe it or not, for some reason it's always like small dogs that get on my nerves. I don't know if that has any relation to this. I never gave it much thought, but like just cats were kind of the thing for me growing up. And um I think the big moment when like I kind of like started paying attention and realizing like hey, something's going on was actually when um my father's cat Churchill died. Somebody he had since I was very young, if not before I was born. Now my history with cats is a little disheartening. I've seen and owned a lot of cats. Many of them did not survive because they were taken when they were very ill. My sister tried to like nurse cats back to health for a period of my life. There was a time when one of our cats gave birth, and I'm not going to get into specific, but I'm just going to say a lot of them didn't survive, and that was kind of like really like almost like traumatizing for me as a kid. But it was kind of just when Churchill died, somebody I had maybe not lived with my entire life, but had always been there when I had gone to see my father, and just kind of seeing him like just vanish one day, laying still in a little box. It was, I don't know. It just kind of like alerted me to like, yeah, no. I mean, I'd only been to like two funerals in my life, but this one just hit on a whole nother personal level. Churchill had always been I mean, he was a bit of a grump, but he was always there, kind of like, I felt like looking out for me, you know? And that's kind of when I decided to actually kind of start this journal. Now, this journal I don't, it's kind of because it was mixed with like, I don't hold to it a lot anymore. The original started this journal because a lot of it was like dreams mixed with like fiction brainstorming stuff. It was all like this weird mumbo jumbo, but it's kind of its kind of significance was just how much I associated with cats and them in general. Um, Way back in the day, around that time period too, is when I really started getting into Aaron Hunter's books, which I didn't quite connect with literally because I could tell they were works of fiction. This isn't how cats actually behave, but just opening up the idea of what a cat-based society could be like in theory, with like human-like intelligence, which is kind of what I am, kind of what a lot of us are. Is just we see these other animals and we have like human-like intelligence because of the bodies we were placed in, and it just feels weird. Like, imagine what these kind of beings would live like if they had a human level intelligence. That's just kind of the way I saw things, and that's kind of why it drew me in so much. Was just, you know, if I was in my ideal world, it would be maybe not quite something like this, but this is a possibility inspired by that kind of line of thought. So even before I was a Therian, before I had my awakening, I always had these like very distinct connection with cats. I felt more comfortable around them than I did with members of my own family. Um, in most cases, except for a few with my brother, where he was just kind of, when I was really young, he was kind of like he kind of understood me in a way nobody else did. Outside of cats, he was really the only one. And just whenever they weren't around, it just felt like weirdly isolated. It was kind of just these really weird feelings. Like you I know stories of some people where it just takes like them forever to kind of figure out what their stereotype is, but I identified that so early on because domestic cats were something I grew up around, and so I just knew. And that's why I'm like, when I actually got to my awakening, it wasn't like, okay, what animal is I? It's okay, what breed am I? I know I'm a cat, but there's a lot of diverse breeds in that, and my goal for that was to actually kind of figure out which one lined up with the most, had the most personality traits that lined up with me as a person. Obviously, it's not going to be a one for one because um, I've lived in a human body for my entire life, and there's always nature versus nurture. So some of those things that I've kind of become were shaped by things around me. But like, what are those like fundamental things that I've always carried with me, even if I didn't understand them? What are those like core beliefs that kind of make me who I am? What cat um, shares so many of those like subtle or direct attributes? And that ended up being the Russian blue, and I kind of lost my head when that happened. So that was kind of when Awakening started. Therian Awakening. It's a very dramatic name, but the whole point is that when you awaken, you're realizing, you're finding this community, realizing you're a part of it, whichever side that might be, and kind of just discovering who you really are, or specifically what you really are. And I've already kind of talked about what finding my stereotype was like. Um, a lot of research into all different kinds of cats. I knew it was domestic cats from the beginning, or at least I had a pretty solid damn hunch. And once all the pieces kind of just started clicking together with the Russian blue, it was like, yeah, no, this is what makes the most sense. And it's not something I've ever felt the need. It's not something I've ever second guessed. It's always made sense to me. I feel like I found like the answer, and that's not to say I'm correct, because some time from now, I might end up being completely off track. I might find I mean, I'm fairly certain I'm a domestic cat. I don't think that's I don't think that's up for self debate. But the whole breeds, like Russian blue, like hits so many of the right boxes. But it is possible that I am just some other breed, or maybe it's no breed in specific. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I ever read too much into it, or kind of just what I did. But that's kind of how I ended up concluding with Cyrus and as a Russian blue. Retrospection. So looking back into just how much of my persona design was kind of based off of that. I mean, blue, short furred cat. I mean, it's not like it's a very basic similarity, especially since Russian blues aren't, actually blue. They're just gray with a and when the light reflects off them, it kind of gives off that illusion. But it's funny how that kind of like came together, and how it's aged into well, when I kind of found out I was a Therian, I'm like, wow. Um, Scar's design, it's definitely not like a realistic cat design, but it's not too far off from the kind of species I end up identifying as, and maybe that kind of like subconsciously went into what I thought looked as a good avatar for myself, in the furry fandom. And the Therian Awakening, the community. So, um, like I said, for a very long time, I never felt the need to engage with the Therian community. It was kind of just something to me that was like, this is something that I'm at peace with. I'm kind of, just discovering on my own, researching every now and then, documenting when I feel like I need to. And honestly, like I knew the community was out there. I just didn't have any drive to connect with it. And as I kind of learned, I don't want to say I still don't, but not in like I do, but not in like a heavy regard. So last Othercon, which was the first Othercon, was my first time actually engaging directly with the community in any capacity. And from then, I don't know, I got involved with some of the other stuff, the Minecraft server, some of the other communities, although that did fizzle out until, I guess, the next Othercon, which is, where we're all right now. So I don't know if I'm ever going to become like a mainstay in the community. Um, I really do like attending Othercon, and I know I'm going to continue to attend it. But other than that, it's all this weird. I just never felt the need to. It was something personal. I never. It's not like furry where like the community is half of why I'm involved. Therian is just what I am. So I never felt the need to, and I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So balancing these two worlds, furry and Therian, despite what the surface and misconceptions, kind of make them out to be, they are two very, very different things for me. The world is full of misconceptions about these two subcultures, and like ever since furries, thinking they're animals, which, no, but then they were kind of like, wait, but there actually is a group that is like that, and that's called Therians, or otherkin, depending on how you want to define animals. And so, for a very long time, to avoid that confusion, one of the reasons I was very private about my Therian side was to kind of avoid that confusion and not kind of contribute to the problem, I guess, or maybe that's just me justifying justifying my decision to hide it. But the other thing was, I'm not afraid of people knowing I'm a furry. Okay, I am a little bit, like, nobody at my work knows, but like my entire family knows, pretty much all of my friends know. And but that's not true about Therian, because furry is kind of like, yeah, that's weird, but I don't think anybody who sees it as crazy is very that's just kind of dumb. That's silly. But Therians, I'm kind of like all too self-aware of how they can come across to people, like these communities. I don't, I full-heartedly believe in what I am, but I also can kind of put myself in the lens of other people and say, yeah, I understand why at first glance this sounds very weird, and I've been very afraid of the ridicule that might come from that. And so that's kind of why I've elected to, for the most part, or at least until recently, kind of kept this private. I don't really advertise it like I do with myself in the fandom. Scar versus Cyrus. Scar, he is the extension of myself. Cyrus is myself, or is a major part of myself. Again, I always consider like the outside influence and how it's dictated me as a person, but that whole segment of me that was there from the beginning, even if it was like obscured or kind of blossomed later into my core beliefs and all these subtle overlaps, that's what I consider Cyrus, and that's what I consider the cat. the cat that I am. So, community versus identity. I kind of already touched over this. I'm in the furry fandom for its community and the outlet of artistic expression it has. But Therians, it's just who I am. That's that's kind of the huge difference. Like, I mean, I know I'm gonna say I am a furry, but that doesn't mean the same as I am a Russian blue cat. They're completely different things. And public and private, one I feel free to talk about over and over, but the other one almost I've really kept private, especially from people in my family. I think only like 2 or 3 people know at most. So, what are the main takeaways from this kind of like personal ramble that I've made? Furry does not equal Therian. There is a difference, and they are not the same thing. You can be a part of both groups, and kind of, and they still be completely different things. The whole point of this was to just kind of like show off my personal line and like what each means to me for anybody who wants to be a part of both communities but doesn't really quite understand, like what each actually can be. I'm sure a lot of people are like this, but there's nothing wrong with like keeping this side of you private, because it's it's a part of who you are. It's something that you do with other people in the community or literally just on your own. There's no reason that you have to go around telling people, and that's totally fine. I've heard from some people that in some places that there is kind of this stigma that if you're a part of both communities, then you're not really like a Therian or whatever. You're just kind of pretending. I don't know. There's always drama in all communities, but there is an option for coexistence, and I actually really appreciate how much this con has welcomed furries into its attendance, whether it's just for curiosity or exploration. Because I mean, at the end of the day, they're two different things. Sure, they might overlap a little bit in concepts, but they're very superficial, and once you actually get into the nitty-gritty of what they are, it's this whole idea that you can't be one and the other is honestly ridiculous. I've kind of found that coexistence in myself, and I think it's something that actually this convention has done a good job of going beyond with. So they're the two different groups. While there is a line between them, they are not the same thing, and you can be a part of one without worrying about the other. So that's the kind of the end of this presentation right here. I hope you guys took something away from this. I know a lot of it was just kind of like personal insight into my history, but I kind of wanted to share what it was like being both a furry and a Therian, and kind of understanding the line between, but why exactly they are so different. If you guys want to check out some of my furry content, it is available on youtube.com/ScarTheFur. I don't normally talk about a lot of Therian stuff, but if I ever get ideas, then you can bet your butt they'll be in the queue. Actually, if anybody has any ideas that they'd like to hear me talk about, usually in a much more organized and structured manner than this, then please feel free to hit me up on Discord. I always have DMs open, but that's really going to be it, guys. I hope you guys took something away from this, and I totally didn't just assemble this thing in the last day because I was paneling at a different convention a week ago. But thanks for sticking with me, guys. I hope you have a great rest of the convention, and I will see you around. Good luck.